13 million people in Australia have some form of vision impairment. That's a lot considering we have 26 million in total population. Today, I'm speaking with Narelle, who is a digital accessibility trainer and auditor. Hello and welcome to the Business Octopus, where we talk about all things sales, marketing, and technology. I'm Avon Collis, CRM and marketing automation specialist at Relevate and all-around good guy. Today, I'm joined by Narelle from Dasat. Welcome. How are you going?
Hey, Avon, look, thank you so much for having us. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
So we were talking a little bit earlier, and we are discussing that there's a significant portion of the population that have issues with accessing information due to vision and or other disability. Can you share a little bit about your experience with this?
Yeah, Avon, I've actually got a deteriorating sight issue. So I was born with it. However, it wasn't really diagnosed till about my early,
Mm.
and ever since then, I've been losing sight. So it plateaus for a while, and then it does what I call a deep dive, and I will get up the next morning and I will have had a major sight loss. So for me, that is relearning everything from scratch, and it's happened a number of times. One of the things I have to relearn from scratch every time is using a computer. The phone's a bit easier because it's more mobile. I can stick it right up against my face.
Mm.
However, a computer's a different story. So I've gone from just being able to use the accessibility tools on the computer that are standard, that come with every Windows and Mac computer, and keeping upping the ante on them until I got to about percent, which the moment you're magnifying anything to 400%, or even 200%, you start to miss a lot of information because most websites don't have, not all of them, but you lose what's on the sides. And it was such a common issue for me where I'd have to say to someone sitting beside me, "Oh, I need to find this button. Can you come over and find it?" And they'd say, "Oh, there it is. Move your mouse. Got it." And that was the norm until now. I am really reliant on screen readers. And screen readers are a technology that basically goes through the code on
Mm.
your website and reads the information. So it works out the tags and it's able to read. It'll say heading one, whatever the heading is, and reads the information to me. It tells me the links, it tells me images, it tells me everything that makes the content. The same happens with documents. And it was the same problem with documents. And don't forget, it's not just people with vision impairment. There's 3.5 million people with some form of hearing impairment in Australia. That's 2018 stats. Obviously, there'd be more now. 1 in 20 at that time had ADHD. I reckon that's probably the number's higher there now. We haven't talked about acquired brain injuries. We haven't talked about people with fine motor skills where they can only use a keyboard, or people that use puff and sip tools, or yeah, there's so many people. There's
Mm.
4.4 million people in Australia with some form of disability. Not everyone to the same extent. However, we haven't mentioned the elderly. We
Mm.
haven't mentioned English as a second language. My in-laws are all from overseas. And sometimes they look at words and go, "What?"
Mm.
Because they don't know. And that's what we're saying. It's a barrier to communication.
You haven't always had the sight impairment, have you?
No, I have actually driven over half of Australia. I learnt to drive in a late 50s Ford Zephyr Ute. I've driven
Mm.
a 1920 Chevy truck, the old crank the front up. Drove tractors, drove dozers, done all types of things. Drove utes, gone. I grew up in a cattle property, so did
Mm.
everything that we had to do. And yeah, I love cars. I'm an actual hoon by nature. And when I was driving by practice, I've got a lot of speeding tickets. But yeah, life changes in unexpected ways.
So how, I guess, does having sight loss, like how did you going from seeing to then not seeing?
Because mine's been gradual, in some ways, friends of mine who've got no sight say it was probably harder
Yeah.
because I had to keep relearning. And mentally, that's tiring. That is
Mm.
emotionally tiring. That is mentally tiring. That is physically tiring. It is every part of you has to
Mm.
relearn because I lose not just sight, I lose spatial awareness. Where I could walk comfortably, say the day before, suddenly that was gone.
Yeah.
It was everything would change, and it is hard, really hard. Friends that have lost their sight overnight, they really struggle as well because, and I've got one friend I'm thinking of in particular that had an operation, lost his sight overnight, and Joe still struggles to use he's getting better with it. Computers, and this is a man with, I think he's got his master's in civil engineering. He's not a
Mm.
silly man. It's just
Yeah.
the effect, because it's not just your sight, every aspect of your life. You struggle. Something like paying a bill,
Mm.
which for everyone is second nature, suddenly becomes not so easy. Or even going and ordering some food at a cafe. Try
Mm.
doing that when you can't see properly. It's hard.
Mm.
Or you can't read it, or you can't hear, or for whatever reason, like a person in a wheelchair where the counters are higher.
Or
No,
yeah, it's like your loss of ability to earn income, or your ability to, particularly if, in that case of the civil engineering, is that that's a
yeah,
highly visual, looking at plans, drawings,
yeah.
sites, and you've spent all that time and money and energy learning that skill, and then now you have that taken away from you. It's very challenging.
It's amazing. He traveled the world doing it. He's lived in other countries. He's now living in a share home because he can't live by himself. He's not independent. He's living in a share home with someone that, if he had his choice, he probably would never have lived there. Yeah,
Well,
it's a lot of choice as well.
I guess that kind of leads into our next question of how does reduced access to information affect people? And, not only from the personal side of, just that change and loss, but obviously there's now, future opportunities and things that are not necessarily as bright.
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me, the hardest day, it wasn't even handing my license in. The hardest day was one of my boys got pretty sick. My husband was away, the other two were at school, and I couldn't drive. And where I was living, taxis wouldn't go to there often. It was very hard to get a taxi, and I had to get him to a doctor. And all I could do, I walked the street until and knocked on every door. And I was so lucky. I think it was about the third door,
Mm.
because obviously we lived in a cul-de-sac. I knew most of the people. And this friend Paul pulled up behind me, and he said, it was his house. He said, "What's wrong?" And I told him, and he said, "You go for David. I'm ringing doctors. We're doing this." And he went inside his house. He grabbed towels. He raced out. And by the time he'd raced out, I had David. Poor David was throwing up everywhere. But, we threw Dave in Paul's car, got him to the doctors.
Mm.
And while he was the doctors, Paul raced across to the chemist. So he took it and did the things I couldn't do. He
Mm.
went to the chemist and he got all the stuff, and he went to whatever it was, the groceries, and got some lemonade and the stuff. And by the time the doctor saw him, and then the doctor sent stuff, I couldn't do any of that. Where 6 months before, I would have done it all, and it wouldn't have been a problem. It was a
Mm.
massive problem, and it was so, yeah. I lost my independence, and I lost choice. I
Yeah.
lost choice in able to pick what I want to eat, how much I want to spend, even where I go. Lose choice.
I think that, when sometimes people, from the context of, this podcast being about aimed at businesses,
Yeah,
is that when businesses think of it as like a cost or a time pressure or something like that. And so hopefully anyone listening to this can understand how detrimental it can be to someone's, personal health, mental health, ability to have freedom. And so ideally, if understanding the impact, it's not small. It's not like, oh, well, my website, it only works for these people and not those people. And it could be, an essential service. I think you were saying that some major service providers who provide services to that niche or that target market,
yeah.
they themselves still don't have the right tools in place.
And that's frustrating. I was at an expo last week, and the challenge that I did for everyone. So I didn't take my guide dog because there were too many people in wheelchairs and with accessibility issues like myself, and with our support workers, and you name it. There were too many people. And this was first thing on Friday morning. So you'd think first thing Friday morning it'd be quieter. Well, it was bedlam.
Mm.
And I had my cane with me. So I use a long cane. It's a long white cane, and it tells me if I'm going to hit things or knock into things or changes in floor texture, things like that. And I had my support worker with me. And so I went to every booth I could get to, and every one of them asked exactly the same question. With my bag of lollies, as a bit of I'm being nice, but I'm deadly serious here. How many websites, actually the question was, have you ensured that your website, your emails, all your documentation is accessible by everyone that uses assistive technology? And it doesn't even have to be assistive technology. If you're a neurodiverse person with ADHD, they like bullet points, stop points. The IT sector, is renowned for the number of people with D and different, issues in that area working in it, because it is the perfect career. Black and white, it is there or it's not. And it was really interesting because everyone said no. And I would think, well, you're in the disability sector. You're wanting us to spend our money with you, but you are not ensuring that we can spend our money with you.
Yeah.
And it's not just that, it's cafes, Avon. We all buy clothes, we all wear shoes, we hop in taxis, we all have electricity, gas. We have all the same bills as everyone else. We just have a few extra bills.
Yes. Yeah. So what can businesses do to improve?
Simple. There is an Australian standard, the Digital Accessibility Standard. The name of it is Australian Standard EN 49:2020. Implement it. What it does, it's based on a global standard, so it just doesn't come from thin air. It's a global standard where universities and your big tech companies, people like all types of people, you'd be surprised who's involved in this, have come together and built a standard for all documentation, emails, websites, PDFs, even PDFs, to ensure that anyone can read it. And we're talking about, or access the information, make informed choices, hopefully in the business's favour, because all we're really talking about is good design and good communication. And the one thing I want to say to everyone is never use the overlay that there are some overlays out there that they say work. They don't. They fix 2 or 3 problems. They can never ensure accessibility, because it's not just about the size of the font or the type of font or the colours. There's reams of issues that it's 4 principles, 13 guidelines incorporated into all your work. Because what were the numbers we said? 13 million people with some form of vision impairment. And that's everything from dyslexia to short-sighted to long-sighted to macular degeneration, colour blindness, you name it, anything with your eyes. Hearing impairment. So we're even looking at auditory processing problems there. We're looking at people are just losing their hearing as they get older. Acquired brain injury. We're looking at the neurodiverse sector where you go on heaps of waffle, they'll move on straight away. And I'm the same. If I hit a website that's not accessible, I move on straight away. I don't use that company. And it's talked about within our different areas, because there's tons of blind Facebook groups and support groups and things, and we all talk to each other.
Yeah.
It's a common thing. And we tell each other the good places to go to, and we tell each other the places to avoid, just like any group or anyone. It's not uncommon.
So what anyone listening to this, I guess, if we think about who this message is for, in my mind, I'm thinking obviously, directors, business owners, and probably marketing managers, anyone who's responsible for those comms messages going out. Is there anybody else that you think would be an ideal target market?
I think you've got it in one. But actually, I would add educators. I'm currently doing a Cert 4 in training and assessment, and I'm still laughing because the language literacy and numeracy module, which is all about how to make modifications for people like myself, is inaccessible.
Yes.
And it is such an issue. And I'm constantly saying to them, you need to fix this document. You need to fix this document. So for me to do a course that someone with normal, or so-called normal, I don't know how many people there are with perfect sight, perfect hearing, perfect everything, could do, it's going to take me a year, because it's not me being able to do the learnings and apply the knowledge. It's then making the documents accessible and the websites accessible and whatever it is, so I can actually do the course.
Yeah. So
and that's a common one.
So what's the incentive for a business to do it? What's the benefit to business?
There's tons. Biggest benefit, 13 million people with vision impairment, 3.5 million people with a form of hearing impairment. Over half of Australia is affected by disability, whether it's their family, whether it's themselves. You're opening yourself up to a wider target market. You will also, if you're making sure it's accessible, you're not going to have people like me come back and say, oh, look, I can't read that. Can you read it out to me? So there's a cost to your business that you won't have thought of. And I had to do it yesterday at a business. I had to get them to read out all these documents to me. Yeah. But that was the cost to them. Even the receptionist, they're $20, $30 an hour. So this receptionist spent 45 minutes reading all these documents out to me. And I had to know what was in the documents. I can't sign without knowing. So that's 2. Another one is your SEO is better, your SEO rankings, because Google looks at this. all rankings the SEO looks at is text. So if your text is there, if it you've got the right keywords, that's good. But if everything else is there, Google ranks it. The more accessible the website, the better ranking you get. Not ranking. You've got a higher target market, less cost to the business. What's the cost of not doing it? Losing stuff. That's a big one. And there's obviously the ethical. In Australia, currently, you can never ever be sued for not being digitally accessible. You can be sued for discrimination.
Yes.
And that can happen, and it does happen. There's only 2 landmark cases. Mostly it goes to the Human Rights Commission, which again involves lawyers and everything else and mediation. So there's cost to the business there. I don't want any business to ever have to go through that. We in the disability sector are dealing with issues like this all the time because we have to mediate with business just to get the access we need. It's not pleasant. It's not nice. We don't want that. It's ethical, it's moral. And what's the one thing that is the negative of it? It costs a tiny bit more in the first place, but suddenly you've got a website that's more maintainable, looks great. We never ever say take away function form. You need to have the website attractive, looking great, doing exactly what you need, good design at the basis of it. And that's really what we're talking about. Good design, good communication, simple stuff.
Excellent. Well, it's been great to speak with you today. And I think that hopefully that the message gets cut through with some business owners to understand the financial impact that it can have and the benefit it can have to so many people's lives. So if you want to find out more about Dasat and Narelle, the link will be on the link to Narelle's contact details will be on the episode comments and in the description, and also on the LinkedIn post. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you have any questions or you'd like to be on the show, you can check out relevate.com.au. But otherwise, you've been listening to the Business Octopus. Thank you and take care.